in the heart of Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, a city where tradition and family values hold the deepest significance, a deadly secret was about to unfold, one so shocking it would tear a family apart in a way no one could ever imagine. It wasn't just an affair, nor was it merely betrayal. It was a conspiracy of trust, a twisted game played by those closest to you, and in the end, it would cost someone their life. This is the story of Layla, a devoted wife, a loving mother, and a woman caught in a web of temptation that led her to a place she could never return from. Layla was married to Amir, a well-known businessman, admired by many in the community for his success and wealth. From the outside, their life seemed perfect, but perfection can be an illusion. When Amir's long hours away on business became routine, Layla found herself alone, and it was then that she began a dangerous relationship with someone she should have trusted most, her own father-in-law. What started as a quiet, hidden affair between Layla and her husband's father slowly spiraled out of control. Neither of them could foresee the deadly consequences of their actions. A family was torn apart, and a life was lost. But what exactly happened? How did the affair between a devoted wife and her father-in-law become something far darker and far more dangerous than anyone could have predicted? We're diving deep into the unraveling of a marriage, the destruction of trust, and the deadly end that followed. But before we go any further, ask yourself this: could you ever imagine betraying your own family? Could you hide such a dark secret from the ones you love most? How far would you go to protect yourself? And in the end, is anyone truly innocent when desire and desperation take over? Let's take a close welcome to Mind Behind the Crime. I thank you, my viewers, for your support as we keep improving. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Layla was just 28 years old in 2008, a mother of 2 small children, living in the bustling city of Riyadh. By all appearances, she had everything a woman could desire: a stable home, a loving husband, and the joy of raising 2 beautiful young kids. Layla had been married to Amir for nearly 6 years, a relationship that had started in the traditional way. She was a devoted wife and mother, known for her kindness and loyalty within her community. She was the picture of what a Saudi wife should be: gracious, elegant, and always putting her family first. But like many, Layla was more than just the role of wife and mother. Beneath her composed exterior, Layla harbored her own dreams, her own desires, and, as life would reveal, her own vulnerabilities. The reality of being a young woman married to a successful man, with the constant pressure to uphold an image of perfection, began to weigh heavily on her. Her life was what many would envy: a beautiful home, children she adored, and the financial security that came from being married to Amir, a respected and admired businessman in their community. But sometimes, even the perfect life can feel like a cage. As the years went by, Layla felt a distance growing between her and Amir. He was often away on business, traveling across the region for weeks at a time. And though he was providing for his family in ways most could only dream of, his absence left Layla feeling increasingly alone. She loved Amir, but there were moments when the silence of their large home, empty during his long trips, became almost unbearable. What Layla didn't know was that this silence would eventually lead her to make a choice that would change her life and her family's forever. Amir was everything Layla had dreamed of when she first met him. He was successful, ambitious, and driven. As a respected businessman in Riyadh, Amir was well known and highly regarded. He was the type of man who could walk into a room and instantly command attention. His business empire was built on hard work, savvy decisions, and an almost obsessive dedication to his career. For Amir, success wasn't just a goal, it was his identity. He worked tirelessly, constantly traveling to meet clients, negotiate deals, and manage his growing company. While his hard work allowed Layla to enjoy a life of comfort and luxury, it also meant he was often away from home. In the beginning, Layla understood the demands of his job, even respected it. She didn't mind the long hours, but over time, the silence in their home began to echo louder and louder. While Amir was away building an empire, Layla was left to manage the home, care for the children, and keep up appearances. But as the months stretched into years, Layla began to feel the cracks in their relationship, cracks that Amir, buried in his work, was too blind to notice. Amir believed his absence was justified. He thought that by providing for his family he was fulfilling his role as a husband. He believed that Layla, as his wife, would be content with the life they had built. But what Amir didn't realize was that while he was focused on his business, Layla was becoming increasingly isolated. The days stretched on, and her loneliness began to turn into something more, a quiet yearning for connection, something deeper than the life they had built together. Layla's vulnerability didn't come overnight. It wasn't a single event that triggered it, but rather a slow accumulation of feelings. She was a mother, a wife, but she was also a woman with emotional needs that had been neglected for far too long. The love she had once felt for Amir, while still present, had been dulled by years of emotional neglect. Amir's long absences were more than just physical. They were emotional, too. Amir's father was a prominent figure in the family. A man respected by all, he was the patriarch of the family, a widower who had always been a guiding figure to Amir. He was in his early 60s, a man of charm and grace, with a keen sense of family loyalty. Yusuf was often present at family events, dispensing wisdom and advice as the elder. To Layla, he was like a second father, a trusted figure in her life. At this particular family gathering, something shifted. Layla, feeling the weight of her loneliness, found herself in deeper conversation with Yusuf. They shared stories of their lives, their shared history, and their mutual love for Amir and the family. As the evening wore on, Layla felt an emotional connection with Yusuf that she hadn't felt in years, perhaps ever. For the first time in a long while, someone was listening to her, really listening. Someone understood her sense of isolation, her struggles as a wife and mother. There was a quiet, comforting bond between them, a bond that, without either of them knowing it, would soon grow into something much darker. It was an evening like many others, a typical family gathering in Riyadh, a celebration to mark a religious holiday. The sounds of laughter filled the air, mingled with the clink of glasses and the aroma of freshly prepared dishes. Layla stood in the corner, speaking to friends, smiling for the guests, all while her mind wandered. She felt a sense of restlessness she couldn't shake. Her husband Amir was away again, caught up in the ever-demanding nature of his business. As usual, she found herself surrounded by the sounds of life, but not truly living in the moment. Among the guests that evening was someone who had always been a quiet yet respected figure in Layla's life, her father-in-law, Khalid. Khalid was a man of great wisdom, known for his calm demeanor and a presence that seemed to command respect without even trying. To Layla, he had always been just another figure in the background, the strong patriarch, the father-in-law, who was a trusted part of their family. But that night, something felt different. Khalid, like Amir, had spent years building his legacy. He had seen it all: success, failure, joy, and loss. His life, much like Amir's, had been one of endless work. But tonight, there was something in Khalid's eyes, a glimmer of attention, a quiet invitation that Layla had never seen before. As they exchanged pleasantries, Layla noticed something unexpected in his gaze. There was a depth to his words, a sense of understanding that felt personal. It began with a simple conversation, nothing more than the usual small talk between family. But as the evening wore on, their talks began to shift from the trivial to something more intimate. Khalid spoke of his travels, his experiences, and his wisdom in ways that resonated deeply with Layla. She found herself drawn to him, not in any overtly romantic way, but in a way that made her feel seen and heard in a way she hadn't in years. For years, Layla had been the supporting wife, the one who stayed behind while her husband was away. Amir was constantly busy, often leaving her to raise their 2 children and maintain their home alone. Her world had become consumed by the needs of others. But Khalid's presence was different. His words seemed to fill the gaps in her life, offering her a glimpse into a world she had longed to explore. He made her feel important. What began as innocent conversation quickly turned into something else. Khalid's attentiveness to her, his kindness, and the deep conversations they shared in private began to ignite something in Layla, a sense of desire for something more. For the first time in years, Layla felt truly appreciated, noticed. It wasn't just his words that captivated her, it was the way he made her feel, understood, valued. The loneliness that had been gnawing at her heart slowly began to dissipate in Khalid's presence. As days turned into weeks, their conversations grew longer, more frequent. What began as an innocent connection now blossomed into a dangerous flirtation. They shared late-night phone calls, messages, and quiet moments when Amir was away. Layla found herself thinking of Khalid when she should have been focusing on her family. The lines between family and temptation began to blur, and Layla found herself walking a tightrope she knew was perilous, but one that she couldn't seem to pull herself off of. It wasn't just the words anymore. It was the stolen glances, the lingering touches that seemed to say more than words ever could. In private moments, Khalid would brush her hand, look at her with a lingering gaze that she couldn't ignore. The subtle acts of attention, things Amir had never given her, began to unravel the deep bond of loyalty she once had for her husband. One evening, after Amir had left for another extended business trip, Layla found herself alone with Khalid. They sat together, sipping tea, talking in low voices about their shared experiences. Layla was caught between guilt and desire. Guilt for her disloyalty to Amir, but a deep, undeniable yearning that made her heart race. It was in that moment that the affair began in earnest. What was once flirtation had become a full-blown secret. The passion was undeniable, but so were the risks. Khalid and Layla both understood the dangerous game they were playing. But in that silence, in those stolen moments, the affair took hold. Layla knew it was wrong, yet every stolen kiss, every whispered promise, pulled her deeper into something she knew she would regret. The affair was reckless and dangerous, a secret that Layla couldn't control, but one that, in her loneliness, she was willing to embrace. The moment she crossed that line with Khalid, nothing would ever be the same again. They had ignited something neither of them could extinguish. And as the affair grew, so did the darkness surrounding it. As the affair continued, Layla's emotions grew more and more complicated. The initial thrill of the secret, the stolen moments, began to warp her reality. Guilt ate at her, but it was masked by the intoxicating allure of Khalid's presence. Every glance, every soft word, every touch was a reminder of a world she wasn't supposed to want but couldn't resist. She loved Amir, she always had. She loved her children, she loved the life they had built together. But something about Khalid's attention felt like a balm to wounds she never fully realized were there. The affair was a dangerous game, one Layla knew she shouldn't be playing. And yet, each time she saw Khalid, it became harder to stay away. His words were laced with approval, and for a woman who had often felt overlooked and isolated in her marriage, this new attention felt intoxicating. In those rare moments when Amir was away, Khalid's presence became a kind of refuge. It was as if he could see her in a way that no one else had truly seen her, beyond the role of wife and mother. But that sense of being understood was deceptive. It was the first step down a road that would lead her to a place where she would lose control. Her heart battled with her mind. She knew the affair was a betrayal, knew it was wrong, but the danger only seemed to heighten the thrill. She knew what she was doing could destroy everything, her marriage, her family, her reputation. Yet every time she saw Khalid, those thoughts faded away. What began as a casual, fleeting connection became something deeper, more consuming. The lines between right and wrong began to blur in a way she couldn't untangle. Khalid, for all his wisdom and calm, knew exactly what he was doing. He wasn't just a father-in-law seeking affection. He was a man who had lived through the trials of life and understood the fragility of human nature. Khalid had always been a calm and steady force in their family, but now he became something else entirely, something darker. He was aware of Layla's emotional vulnerability. He knew the perfect way to keep her trapped, feeding her doubts about her marriage and insecurities about herself. Khalid whispered the words she wanted to hear, the words no one else was offering. He told her that their affair was a mistake, yes, but a beautiful mistake. He promised her that they could keep it a secret, that no one would ever know. He convinced her that their bond was special, that it was something beyond a mere physical attraction. Slowly, subtly, he began to paint a picture of a world where they could be together, one where they could escape the constraints of family and society and live in a perfect, private world of their own. He told her that what they shared was something unique, something that could not be found anywhere else. He made her feel like their love was real, even though it was built on lies. And for Layla, the idea of being truly seen by Khalid, of feeling wanted in a way that Amir's long absences had denied her, became increasingly irresistible. But with every promise Khalid made, the walls around Layla's world began to crumble. The affair was no longer just a fleeting escape, it became a dangerous addiction. At the same time, Amir's business was expanding rapidly, pulling him further and further away from home, both physically and emotionally. What had once been a busy but manageable work schedule now turned into constant travel, endless meetings, and long nights away from Riyadh. Layla's phone calls with Amir grew shorter, their conversations more strained. She felt the growing distance between them, and every time Amir left for another business trip, it became harder to ignore the ache of loneliness in her heart. Amir had always been a good provider, and in many ways he loved Layla. But the emotional distance began to widen. The passionate love they had once shared seemed like a distant memory. Layla could no longer deny that she was starved for emotional intimacy. When Amir was around, he seemed distracted, caught up in his own world of numbers and deadlines. The void he left was too vast to ignore. Khalid, on the other hand, was always present, always there when she needed someone to talk to. He saw her in ways Amir no longer did. He listened, really listened, and that made all the difference. Layla began to resent Amir for his absence and the emotional coldness she felt from him. She felt trapped in a marriage where she was physically present, but emotionally neglected. It was this growing sense of abandonment that left Layla vulnerable to Khalid's influence. As the affair escalated, the lines between family and desire became nearly impossible to separate. What had started as a spark of something forbidden began to feel like a necessity. Layla's internal struggle deepened. Could she continue this dangerous secret, or would the walls eventually come crashing down? Her love for Amir seemed to fade with each passing day, replaced by a burning, illicit passion for Khalid that felt more real than anything she'd experienced in years. It was a night that would change everything, a night that would unravel the lives of everyone involved in the most devastating way possible. Amir had decided to come home earlier than expected from one of his business trips. He had a surprise for Layla. He wanted to introduce her to a potential new business partner, someone he had been working closely with during his time abroad. Layla, surprised by his early return, tried to put on a calm face, unaware that the evening was about to take a shocking turn. As Amir and his business partner entered the dining room, Layla froze. There, seated at the table, was none other than Khalid, her father-in-law, the man she had betrayed her husband with. Khalid's eyes met hers, and in that moment, all the years of secrets, stolen moments, and whispered conversations crashed down on her like a tidal wave. The weight of their affair hung in the air like a noose, tightening with every breath. Signaling her with his hand, Crowley walked over to the princess's assigned unit and took a seat at her side. Amir's business partner stood quietly off to the side, sensing the tension but unsure of what exactly was happening. But for Amir and Layla, the world seemed to stop. The man who had built their family's future, the man who had been absent so often, was now standing face to face with the person who had been part of his most intimate betrayal. His father, his own flesh and blood, and Layla, the woman who had sworn loyalty to him in front of Allah, was now exposed as the one who had shattered the foundation of their relationship. As Amir's eyes flicked back and forth between his wife and his father, the storm inside him erupted. Anger, disbelief, and raw pain contorted his features. The man who had been his greatest mentor, his role model, had now become the ultimate betrayer. Layla could see the hurt in Amir's eyes, a look she had never wanted to see, but one she knew was inevitable. "What the hell is going on?" Amir's voice trembled with a mixture of rage and shock. "How could you, Layla?" His eyes turned to Khalid, the anger now rising to a boiling point. "You are my father!" "You..." Layla, feeling the weight of her guilt, opened her mouth, but the words seemed to fail her. She had no excuse, no way to justify what had happened. There was no way to undo the damage she had caused. As Amir's wrath grew, Layla tried to speak, to explain herself, but nothing she said seemed to make any sense. I hate myself," she stammered, tears filling her eyes. But her voice was drowned out by the force of his fury. "Don't! Just don't!" Amir screamed, his voice breaking. He turned to Khalid, his father, and his anger was nearly uncontrollable. "How could you betray me like this? You've done something unforgivable, you both of you." Khalid, ever the calm and collected figure, stood silently. The weight of the situation seemed to settle on him as well, but he didn't flinch. His expression was one of quiet resolve, as if he had accepted the consequences of his actions long before the truth had come to light. "Amir, this is not what you think," Khalid began, his voice steady, but there was no defending the affair now. Layla stood frozen, unable to speak. The family that had once been so tight-knit, so full of love and trust, was now shattered. The secret affair that had seemed so thrilling, so intoxicating, now hung heavy in the air, its consequences rippling out in every direction. As the confrontation reached its boiling point, Layla realized there was no going back. Amir's face, contorted with disbelief and pain, would be forever imprinted in her memory. The family, once whole, had been broken beyond repair. But the tragedy didn't end with the revelation. What had started as a confrontation quickly escalated into something far darker. Amir, consumed by an overwhelming rage, stood there, shaking with disbelief. His eyes burned with betrayal, and the anger that had been building inside him for years erupted violently. He shouted at Khalid, demanding an explanation, demanding to know how this could happen, how his own father could betray him in the most intimate way possible. Words were thrown back and forth, harsh accusations cutting through the silence of the room. Layla, frozen in shock, could barely process the unfolding events. She wanted to stop them, to scream, to make it all stop, but the emotions were too raw, too powerful. Khalid, always calm and composed, seemed almost unaffected by Amir's rage. But that was the final mistake. In a moment of uncontrollable fury, Amir grabbed a nearby weapon, something small and easily within reach. Perhaps in another world this scene might have played out differently, but in that moment it was as if time had slowed. One wrong move, one wrong word, and suddenly Amir was standing over his father, weapon in hand. What followed was a blur, a flash of violence, a gasp of disbelief, and then silence. Layla screamed as Amir dropped the weapon. Khalid lay motionless on the floor, blood spreading across the marble. What had started as a family dinner was now a scene of horror. In the blink of an eye, everything had changed. The man who had been a trusted father, a revered patriarch, was now dead, killed by his own son. In a fit of rage, spurred on by betrayal, by anger, by the devastating consequences of the affair. The family, once bound by love, loyalty, and tradition, was now shattered. Khalid's death was a moment of finality. There was no turning back from what had just happened. Layla could barely breathe as she watched her husband collapse in guilt and horror, his anger now replaced with disbelief. The man who had destroyed their family was dead, but the true destruction had only just begun. Layla was left with nothing but the pieces of a life she had so carelessly shattered. Her affair had led to the murder of the man who had been her partner in crime. The guilt of what she had done, of the choices she had made, weighed on her like a suffocating fog. She had lost not only her marriage, but her family, her sense of self, and her very future. But the consequences didn't end with the loss of her father-in-law. Layla's life, once full of promise, now lay in ruins. She had no idea what would come next, but deep down she knew it was only a matter of time before the full weight of her actions would catch up to her. As the authorities arrived, the chaos intensified. Amir, now overwhelmed with the reality of what he had done, was arrested on the spot. His life was now in the hands of the law, and the man who had once been a pillar of his community was now facing charges of murder. Layla, caught between her love for Amir and the undeniable truth of what had transpired, was left to pick up the pieces of the shattered family. The legal proceedings were swift and brutal. Amir's fate was sealed as the court determined his guilt in the heat of the moment. The tragedy of his actions was impossible to ignore. Layla, meanwhile, faced a different kind of sentence, one that was deeply emotional, one that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She had lost her husband, the father of her children, and the life she had known. Her children, young and innocent, would grow up without a father, without the family they had once been part of. Layla was left to face the consequences of her betrayal in silence, wondering how she had let everything slip through her fingers. This tragic tale is a harsh reminder of the fragility of trust and the destructive power of hidden secrets. Layla's affair with her father-in-law, Khalid, wasn't just a betrayal of her husband, it was a betrayal of the very foundation of their family. What began as a quiet moment of connection quickly spiraled into an uncontrollable series of events that ended in death, despair, and devastation. The choices we make, especially those made in moments of weakness, can carry consequences far beyond what we imagine. For Layla, the allure of Khalid's attention and the escape from her loneliness came at a cost she could never repay. For Amir, a moment of rage born out of heartbreak cost him his freedom, his father, and his family. And for Khalid, a man who had once been a pillar of strength, it ended in the ultimate price, his life. But what is the true cost of betrayal? Is a fleeting escape from reality ever worth the destruction of everything you hold dear? The tragedy of this story isn't just in the lives lost or the family torn apart. It's in the realization that one small choice can unravel everything. In the end, secrets have a way of coming to light, and when they do, the damage they cause can be irreversible. What do you think drove Layla to make such a devastating choice? Could she have turned back before it was too late? And what about Amir? Was his reaction justified, or did he let his emotions destroy what little hope their family had left? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. This story is more than just a crime. It's a glimpse into the complexity of human emotion, desire, and the irreversible consequences of our actions. If you found this gripping and want to hear more true crime tales that uncover the shocking realities behind closed doors, don't forget to hit the like button, share this video, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring you more stories like this one. And as always, stay safe and take care of the ones you love, because secrets, no matter how hidden, always have a way of coming to light.